members of families to the soldiers now serving in Afghanistan. And behind them, of course, that array of Canadian flags here in this impressive Hall of Honor right in the center of the center block on Parliament Hill. The Prime Minister tonight is expected to obviously talk about 9/11, but may also be talking about Afghanistan and the sacrifice there that Canadians have made over the last several years. And here is Stephen Harper.
Good evening. Tonight is the 5th anniversary of the terrible events of September 11th, 2001. I'm speaking to you from the Hall of Honor in the center block of Parliament. And with me are some Canadians whose lives have been touched by 9/11 in ways that most of us can't even begin to imagine. Men and women who lost loved ones in the attacks on the World Trade Center. Tanya Tomasevic, who lost her husband, Vladimir. Danny Eisen, who lost his cousin, Danny. And Maureen and Erica Vesnicki, who lost their husband and father, Cam. I asked them to join me because words alone are not enough to express what needs to be said today. As we pay tribute to those, including the 24 Canadians who lost their lives on that infamous day 5 years ago, their family members remind us that they were real people with real lives. Lives that were cut short, deliberately so, by a murderous act of terrorism. Like most Canadians, I have a vivid memory of that morning, as my wife, Lorene, and I watched the second tower collapse on television. As the enormity of the events began to sink in, I turned to her and said, "This will change the course of history." And so it has. In the years that followed, terror struck Bali in Indonesia, Madrid in Spain, and London in Great Britain. And security forces in many countries, including Canada, have foiled alleged terrorist plots before they could be executed. The targets and tactics were different in every case, but the objective is always the same: to kill, maim, and terrify as many people as possible. Not in the name of any idealistic cause, but because of an ideology of hatred. And while this war of terror has displayed some of the worst of which humanity is capable, so too it has revealed the greatness and generosity that lie at the core of so many ordinary people. Something which was on display for all to see when Canadians opened their arms and homes to the thousands of travelers whose flights were diverted on 9/11. And because of this war on terrorism, people around the world have come together to offer a better vision of the future for all humanity. For this vision to take hold, the menace of terror must be confronted. And that is why the countries of the United Nations, with unprecedented unity and determination, launched their mission in Afghanistan to deal with the source of the 9/11 terror and to end once and for all the brutal regime that horribly mistreated its own people while coddling terrorists. And that is why I invited also the families of some Canadian soldiers who are currently serving in Afghanistan to join us here today. I want to thank Raquel Hounsell and Janice Shaw for being here. Their husbands are currently serving in Afghanistan, and Captain Edward and Judy Korshub, whose son is serving in Afghanistan. Their presence here also reminds us that real people, Canadian men and women with families and children, are courageously putting themselves forward to make that part of the world a safer place. It is the desire to make a better and safer world which compels our soldiers to put their lives on the line. There are Canadian heroes being made every day in the desert and mountains of southern Afghanistan. These are the stories we don't hear. The countless acts of courage and sacrifice that occur every day on the battlefield and in the towns and villages where Canadians are reconstructing the basic infrastructure of a shattered nation. Because of their efforts, the Taliban is on the run, not in charge. Women now have basic rights as human beings. Youngsters are getting a chance to go to school. And many, but not yet all, Afghan families are beginning to rebuild their lives with our help. We are a country that has always accepted its responsibilities in the world. From two great wars in Europe, from Korea to the Balkans, Canada has acted whenever the United Nations has asked. And as the events of September 11th so clearly illustrate, the horrors of the world will not go away if we turn a blind eye to them, no matter how far off they may be. And these horrors cannot be stopped unless some among us are willing to accept enormous sacrifice and risk to themselves. I would ask that tonight you keep in your thoughts and prayers the victims and families of 9/11 and all those ordinary people who have died or lost loved ones in related acts of terror. I would also ask as well that you keep in your thoughts and prayers the personnel and families of the extraordinary people in Afghanistan and elsewhere who have put themselves on the line so that the world is a better and safer place for all of us. Good night.
Prime Minister Stephen Harper speaking from Ottawa on the occasion of the 5th anniversary of the terror attacks in the United States. And with me from our Ottawa Bureau, Chief Political Correspondent Craig Oliver. Craig, what's your take on the Prime Minister's message tonight?
Lloyd, all of the public opinion polls indicate that Canadians are at best uncertain about their support for the war in Afghanistan. So I think what the Prime Minister was hoping to do was make a direct emotional connection between the 9/11 attacks, international terrorism, and Canada's mission in Afghanistan, which is where the attackers were trained. And to give it a visceral human face, he surrounded himself with relatives of those killed in the attacks in the United States, and also the families of Canadian troops who are putting their lives on the line in Afghanistan. So I think to that extent he made a pretty effective presentation. He didn't take questions. He didn't answer a lot of questions that many of us have about casualties in particular.
Thank you, Craig. A reminder, we'll have special coverage on the CTV National News tonight. Local news coming now in Ontario, Quebec. Elsewhere, we return to regular programming.